Good morning and welcome to the first episode of In the Public Defense. My name is Stephanie and I am I'm a public defender, and I have been a public defender for over a decade now. Currently work in Long Island, in Long Island, whichever you prefer to say, and I have spent my entire career on Long Island in public defense. I decided to make my first episode today on a case that I think warrants more attention, and that is the case of Robert Brooks. Now, I'm not sure if you know who Robert Brooks is. I'm not sure if you know what happened to Robert Brooks. I'm not sure if you know pretty much anything about Robert Brooks, but basically, Mr. Brooks is an inmate, a person who was murdered by corrections officers at Marcy Correctional Facility on December 9th. He died on December 10th at Marcy Correctional Facility in Utica, New York. Now, I know what you're going to say. I already know what you're going to say. I know what the comments are going to say. And I know what the majority of people who have never loved or cared about a person who has been incarcerated are going to say. And they're going to say, well, he deserved to be there. And what I think is most important for you to understand is that people don't just end up in prison. People don't just end up in jail. Now, again, prison and jail are two different things, but Robert Brooks was serving a period of 12 years incarcerated after pleading guilty to an assault in the first degree. Now, a little background on his crime, because I know you're all going to get stuck on that, but Robert Brooks pled guilty to assault in the first degree for stabbing his girlfriend back in 2017. The crime took place in 2016. He pled guilty in 2017. Now, what I can tell you about a plea of guilty is that a plea of guilty either comes after a district attorney or a judge offers you a plea deal. A plea of guilty is done so an individual can take responsibility for their crime while saving the victim, the complainant, the hardship or the trauma of coming into court and facing her accuser or reliving the events that took place. So off the bat, Robert Brooks accepted responsibility for his crime, was sentenced by a New York State court after a investigation was done into the crime, and a determined sentence of 12 years was found to be appropriate for the actions that he committed. In our legal system in the United States, in our legal system in New York State, where I practice, that is the end of the case. That's it. He accepted responsibility. He went through the pre-sentence investigation report. He admitted to what he had done. After speaking with his lawyer, he admitted guilt in court, and he was sentenced to 12 years. That is how our carceral system in New York State works. He took responsibility and was serving his sentence. That is the punishment that fit the crime, and that is what we do in the United States. That's the end of it. He took responsibility for his actions. He was attempting to make his life better, and he only had a year and a half left on his sentence before he was going to be released. On December 9th, on the morning of December 9th, he was transferred from Mohawk Correctional Facility to Marcy Correctional Facility in Utica. Now, at this point in time, and it's unknown why he was transported to Marcy, he made his way and was transported by the Sheriff's Department to Marcy Correctional Facility. At some point on December 9th, corrections officers took him to the infirmary, the medical ward, and I'm going to try and insert the video of that right now. So let's see if I can do this, because this is all new to me and this is my first video. So we're going to see if I can figure out how to do this. So let's see. Give me a second, because we don't ever really know if I know what I'm doing, but let's 8:59. No. Okay. So obviously I can't figure out how to do that, but nevertheless, there is video on the Attorney General's website that will show you the moment that he is dragged into the medical ward. Now, trigger warning if you watch the video, it's very difficult to watch, but he is carried in the air, feet in the air and hands in the air by several officers. Now, he's dragged into the medical ward, and then he's placed in a bay, in a room. And from this point on, the series of events that takes place are relatively shocking. And by shocking, I mean disturbing and disgusting. What happens at this point is you can see from the video corrections officers placing something in his mouth to keep him quiet, nurses coming in and out, corrections officers coming in and out. They beat him with a shoe, they beat him with their feet, they beat him with their hands. At one point, they drag him off the bed, hold him by his neck up against the wall, with his feet dangling on the ground. And this is all captured on body cam footage. There's no reason or explanation given to his family, to the correctional facility, or to anybody as to why Mr. Brooks was transferred to Marcy Correctional Facility or why he was brought down to the medical ward. But he is beaten for an extended period of time, and it is brutal. It's all hands on deck by these corrections officers. It is a gang assault. And I'm going to say that again. It was a gang assault. There's no doubt in my mind that what they did to this man is by definition, by the New York State penal law, a gang assault. There's approximately 11 officers and 2 nurses, all of which have been named in a federal civil rights lawsuit filed by his family. In fact, there's 17 people named in the lawsuit. But what had happened to him in that room that is captured on the body cam footage is nothing short of one of the most heinous crimes I've seen on camera. And I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of body cam footage. I truly have. I see body cam footage every day. Robert Brooks, no matter what crime he committed, to be placed in custody, to be sentenced to that crime, did not deserve to be murdered by those corrections officers. Okay, I'm going to read you their names because I think that they deserve to have their names said out loud. Okay, because if we're going to talk about the crime that Robert Brooks committed, we're going to name the officers and talk about the crimes that they committed. Okay, now I might say their names wrong, but I think their names deserve to be said as well. So we have Anthony Farina, Matthew Gallier, Nicholas Anzalone, David Kingsley, Nicholas Kiefer, Robert Kessler, Michael Fisher, Chris Walrath, Michael Along, Shea Schaff, David Walters, Michael Mashaw, Glenn Tromley, Kyle Doshna, Abedin Mehmedik, and Daniel Martaluccio. Now, 4 of those videos, I believe the officers had their body cams on, and the rest of them had their body cams on standby mode. Body cam footage recovered, okay? Body cams, and the specific ones that these officers were wearing, record even when they're in standby mode or when the officers think that they've turned them off. So while it's tough to watch, we're lucky to have the footage so we know exactly how Robert Brooks was murdered that day. And I say murdered because he was murdered. There is no justifiable reason for homicide. And homicide was committed. Intentional homicide was committed here. These officers And I hate to even use the word officer because I don't want to disparage the other officers out there that would never commit a crime like this. But watching these grown men and women basically gang assault this man and kill him while he is handcuffed and crying is truly one of the most horrific things I've ever seen. And I think you would agree if you saw it. Now, I don't care what he did to be put into prison. And you should not either. Because as anyone in a civilized world should agree, that despite what this man may have done, this should not happen to anyone. And I say that because how would you feel if this was someone that you loved or cared about, that was repentant for what they had done, was serving their time, and then you get a phone call that they died and you don't have answers? And then you see the footage, and then you find out that this individual was murdered, not by another inmate, but by the people that are there to keep him safe. Now, in the lawsuit, the nurses are also are also mentioned in the lawsuit, the warden, and other individuals that are in the jail. The warden has since been replaced. And what I also want to talk to you now about is what the next steps are. So the Attorney General in New York has recused herself of prosecuting this case. Now, why has she done that? Well, the Attorney General's office represents corrections officers when they are named defendants in federal claims or accused by inmates of crimes or assaults or things like that. So on January 2nd, the Attorney General of New York recused herself upon completing a conflict check, where it was discovered that 4 of the officers that are being investigated have pending litigation where they are accused of similar things, and the Attorney General's office is representing them. Now let that sink in for you. 4 of the officers who beat this man to death have similar litigation pending where they are accused of similar things. And the Attorney General's office is representing them. They still had jobs. Now, what that leads me to believe is that Internal Affairs has already investigated these men and has found that these charges were unfounded. I don't know that for sure, but they were still employed. They were still working. That blows my mind. Which also leads me to believe and leads me to insist that Internal Affairs needs to be reformed. The police cannot police the police. They can't. Because things like this then happen. Robert Brooks then dies. Other Robert Brooks dies. This man should have never been subjected to the torture that he was put through. Now to today, and it's January 18th, it's been over a month, almost 2, since this happened, and there has been absolutely no charges brought against any of these criminals, any of these murderers. The case is now with the Onondaga District Attorney's Office, who's been appointed as a special prosecutor. That's Mr. Michael Fitzpatrick, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sorry, William Fitzpatrick. And we're waiting to see what he does. What I would suggest is you call his office and demand justice for Mr. Brooks. Let me know if you have any questions. It was great to talk to you today. Thank you for tuning into In the Public Defense.